All right, welcome to day 3 of your STAAR Blitz. Okay, so today might be a little bit longer because I'm going to teach you something new, but let's go ahead and go over the warm-up first. All right, so it says determine which ordered pairs are in the solution set of 6x minus 2y is less than 8. So remember, when you see something with x and y on the same side, this means this is in standard form. And if so if we have something in standard form and it wants us to graph it or identify the slope in the y-intercept, then we must solve for y. So remember, when we solve for y, there are 2 steps. So first step, you're going to move x away from y. So remember, when we move things, we're not actually going to do any math here. You're just adding and subtracting it over, and pretty much you're just changing the sign. So in this case, I want to move this 6x to this side with the 8. So because it's a positive 6x on this side, I'm going to make it a negative 6x on the right-hand side. So let me rewrite my equation. So now I have negative 2y is less than negative 6x plus 8. Okay, you always want to put your slope first, so that's why I put negative 6x in front of 8. All right, and then our second step is to divide the number off of y. Okay, all right, so that's just my shortening of that. Okay, so divide number off of y. All right, so what this is I'm going to take whatever number is multiplying to y, and I'm dividing it off. So this is when you're actually going to do math. Okay. All right, so hopefully we remember the rule of dividing by negatives in inequality. So whenever that sign in the middle is not an equal sign and it's an inequality, okay, you must pay attention to what you're dividing by. So because we're dividing by a negative, our rule is that you must flip the sign. So now, since we're dividing by a negative here, that negative 2, I now have y equals, or not equals, sorry, y is now going to be greater than, okay, so this is a less than sign, okay, so now it's going to be y is greater than, okay, and then now you just do your math. So negative 6 divided by negative 2 will get you a positive 3x, and then 8 divided by negative 2 will get you a negative 4, okay? So now we just graph the line as usual. So usually when we graph, we always start with the y-intercept. So your y-intercept here is this negative 4, okay? So I'm going to start with negative 4, and then my slope is 3. So this means I'm going to rise 3 from the y-intercept and run 1 to the right. Rise 3, run 1. Rise 3, run 1, rise 3. And you just continue to do it until you fall off the page or the graph. Okay, so here's where it gets tricky. Or we have to remember it. Because it's not an equal sign, we are now trying to decide what kind of line we draw and what shading there is. Because what this inequality is saying is, hey, every value that is greater than 3x minus 4 is part of the solution. Okay, so remember our rules. If we have a inequality that is just the inequality, so it's either greater than or the less than sign, this means we're going to do a dotted line. If it's greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, this is going to be a solid line. If it both greater than, we're going to shade above. Or if there are less than or equal to, we're going to shade below. So remember my trick that I taught y'all. So if y is greater than, okay, y is less than, we can determine how we're going to shade by this greater than sign. I can make an A out of it. So this is above, a sideways A for those that haven't been here. And then with the less than sign, I can make a B. Okay, so this is below. If you try to make a B with this one that's for above, it'll be a backwards B. Okay, so that doesn't make sense. All right. So let's determine what we need here. So because this is just a less than or greater than sign, I'm going to do a dotted line. And then because the alligator or the inequality is facing towards the y, it makes an A. Okay, so for those that like to do it, it makes an A. All right, we're going to shade above. Okay, so let's make my dotted line. Okay, and because we're going to shade above, I'm going to look to where the inequality or the y-intercept is, and I'm shading above the y-intercept. So it's all this side. So now we need to determine which ordered pairs are solutions. Okay, so I'm going to plot these points. All right, so we have 0, -4, so 0 to the left or right, and I go down -4, so the y-intercept. That would be not a solution because it falls on that line. That's what a dotted line means, that we cannot include that point. All right, so -4, 0 is this one, so it is a solution. -6, 2 is a solution. 6, -2, not a solution. Oh, sorry. And 0, 0 is a solution. All right. Number 2, it says, what is the equation in standard form? So this is something I'm going to teach you new. Okay, and you will have a question. Number 6 on your assignment is like this. So pay attention here. All right, so 1, it's wanting us to write it in standard form. Okay, so in order to write it in standard form, you must know the slope-intercept form. So let's find the slope-intercept form first. So you got to know the slope-intercept. So we're going to take the slope-intercept form. So this means you need the slope and the y-intercept. So your y-intercept is -3. And your slope here, it looks like it's we're going to rise 1, but run to the left 2. So that is a slope of a -1/2. So then my slope-intercept form is y equals -1/2 x minus 3. Okay, so we know how to change standard form, which is exactly what we did on number 1, and convert it to slope-intercept form. That's exactly what we did. We moved x, we divided the number off of y. So when we're going to do the opposite, when we're going to change the y-intercept to the standard form, you do the opposite of your steps. So usually step 1 is move x away from y. Well, step 1 over here, when we're trying to change it from slope-intercept to standard form, is to move x with y. So you're going to move it the same way. So when I move it, I'm still going to do the opposite sign. So now, because it's a -1/2, it's going to be a +1/2 over here. So let's rewrite what we have. So now we have a +1/2 x plus y equals -3. So then, usually our second step is divide the number off of y. But this time, we're going to multiply the whole equation by the denominator. All right, so if you don't know what the denominator is, it's the bottom number of the fraction. All right, so here's why. Standard form does not like negative numbers being first or fractions. So in order to take care of that, you must multiply by the bottom number. So if this number was negative, by the way, you would multiply by -2. So you're going to see that for when x is negative, you don't want that. Okay, so because we have a fraction here with the x, we don't want that. So we multiply the whole equation by the denominator. So the denominator here is 2. So I'm going to multiply the whole equation by 2. So remember, this means distribute. So when I distribute 2 and multiply it by 1/2, I get 1. So that means 1x. And then I distribute this 2 to the y. So then 2 times y is 2y. And then I distribute this 2 to the -3. So 2 times -3 is -6. And here is your answer. So it's pretty much like you're doing the opposite of what you would do to solve for y. Okay, so I'm going to lead you all through that on number 6 again, just to kind of practice it. But pretty much is the opposite of what you do. All right, the graph model of the linear relationship between the number of monthly payments made on the loan and the remaining balance of dollars left to pay on the loan. Which statement describes the x-intercept? Okay, so I'm going to go find the x-intercept. Well, one, the x-intercept is the x-axis. Okay, so in this case, it is 60. Okay, so the number is 60. So we need to make sure we're choosing an answer choice with the number 60. All right, because it is on the x-axis, and that's what the x-intercept is. So if you want to interpret what that means, look at what the x-axis is labeled with. It's labeled with the number of monthly payments. Okay, so let's go through our answer choices. 1, you can get rid of B and D. Why? Because they mentioned 27,000. Well, that's not our x-intercept, guys. Our x-intercept is 60. So A says the x-intercept 60, which represents the initial balance. Well, guys, the initial balance has always and will always be your y-intercept, not your x-intercept. An initial balance is always your y-intercept. So in that case, it represents the number of monthly payments needed to repay the loan, which is exactly right. When I reach 60 months, my account balance is at 0. So that means I took 60 months to pay off this loan, which is exactly what C says. All right. Okay, so I'm not going to go through a lot of this because we should know like what slope is, what y-intercept is, what an x-intercept is. The one thing I will remind us that an x-intercept is when the y value equals 0. So in this case, if I wanted to find the y or the x-intercept, I could plug in 0 for y. So in this case, like if my equation was y equals 2x plus 3, and I wanted to find the y-intercept, or x-intercept, sorry, I would plug in 0 for y and solve for x. Well, remember when we solve for x, we can do menu 3-1. You will have a question where it's asking for the x-intercept, and you can't necessarily graph it and find it. Okay, so in this case, I would just plug in 0 for x or for y and solve for x. Okay, all right. So if you wanted to solve this by hand, I would subtract 3, so it'd be -3 equals 2x, and then divide by 2. So our x-intercept is -3/2, which would be hard to determine if you graphed. Okay, so it's easier if you understand and remember that a y-intercept is when x equals 0, and an x-intercept is when y equals 0. Okay. All right. Okay, so writing linear functions. So this is where we need to remember our forms. So we have slope-intercept form, which is our favorite, y equals mx plus b. And then we have point slope form. So remember with point slope form, it's a point on the line and the slope. Okay, it's very straightforward. Okay, so remember your y1 and your x1 technically change its sign. Okay, so in this case, if your slope is 2 and your point is -3, 4, okay, remember this is your x value, this is your y value. So when I go to put them in point slope form, it's y minus my y1, which is 4. My y value is 4. My slope is 2. And then x minus my x value, which is a -3. Well, remember, when we subtract a negative, that gets us a positive. So that's why it looks like it changes its sign. And by the way, you are given these forms on the STAAR test, so you do not have to memorize these. All right, but you do need to know that these negative signs do kind of flip things around. All right, so just remember that that negative sign is not just there for fun. Put that negative sign there, and then if your number is negative, then it's minus a negative, and we should remember that rule. When we subtract a negative, it changes it to a positive. Then we have our standard form. So whenever you see standard form, we need to remember solve for y. Always. Okay? We never want to be in standard form unless it tells us to go to standard form. All right? So let's do this one. This is another practice of changing it to standard form. So the graph of a linear function is shown on the grid. What steps would you take to write the equation in that represents this graph in standard form? So we're not going to turn and talk. We're going to talk about it again. Like we're going to do this question again. So again, you have, in order to change to standard form, you must know the slope-intercept form. So the slope-intercept form, our b value is -3, and our slope again is a -1/2. I wonder, did I mess up on that one? I sure did. That should, oh no, okay, never mind, I got it. Sorry guys, it's late. All right, so again, our y equals -1/2x minus 3. So we want to change it to standard form. You must move x to the other side. So when I move it, it changes its sign. So now it's 1/2x plus y equals a -3. So if this number was negative, right now, like when you move the x and it ends up being negative, you would need to multiply by a negative number. But because it's positive, you multiply by a positive number. And so remember, when we multiply, so step 1 was to move it. Step 2 is to multiply by the denominator. So because the denominator is 2, we're going to multiply by the 2. Remember, we multiply everything. So 2 times 1/2 is just 1. 2 times y is 2y. 2 times -3 is a -6. Here is your answer. So I'm going to go to number 6, and I'm going to show you again, okay? All right, so do your best on this. Remember, when it's in slope-intercept or standard form, you must change it to, you have to solve for y. So you cannot do anything unless you solve for y. Okay? Remember, what is the x-intercept? Once you get your equation, remember this is when y equals 0. And then you can do menu 3-1, just like we talked about up there. Okay? This one, number 4, you can do lists and spreadsheets. Number 5, you have to actually write the equation yourself. Okay? So if I'm planting a 20-foot tall tree, that's the starting point, and then it says the rate is 2.5. Okay, so this means this is my M. If I'm starting off with a 25-foot tree, then this is my B. Okay. All right, number 6 is what I want to go over. All right, so it says, what is the equation in slope-intercept form? What is the equation in point-slope form? What is the equation in standard form? So I'm not going to do this one for you because it should be easy. You just pick any point on the line and plug it in. But I am going to talk about how we go from slope-intercept to standard. So again, you must know the y-intercept, which is 2. So your b value is 2. Your slope here is, I'm going to rise 2 and run 3. So my slope is 2 over 3. So my slope-intercept form is y equals 2 over 3x plus 2. Remember your point-slope form, you're going to still use that m is 2 over 3, but now you get to pick any point on that line. Okay? So you get to pick any point. Doesn't matter which point. But remember, okay, the subtraction sign stays. So if it's minus and negative, it'll change the sign, okay? All right, so do not forget to change the sign. All right, so now let's do standard form. So remember, you must take the slope-intercept form. So y equals 2 over 3x plus 2. So again, we're going to move x to y over there with y. So because it's a positive number, now it's going to be a negative 2 over 3x plus y equals 2. So all I did was move this 2 over 3 to the opposite side, and when I do that, it changes the side. Okay? All right. And then step 2 is to multiply by the denominator. So remember, if it's a negative number, we want to multiply by a negative. So the denominator here is 3. But because it's a negative, I'm going to multiply. Let's zoom in here. I'm going to multiply by a negative 3. Okay? I don't want negative numbers at first for standard form. So when I multiply this, negative 3 times negative 2 over 3, I get a positive 2x. When I multiply negative 3 by y, I get a negative 3y. And then I multiply negative 3 times 2, and I get negative 6. Here is your answer. Again, we have not taught you this just because it's not too important on the STAAR test, but I want you to have that ability to get a question right if you can remember. It's literally the opposite of solving for y, okay? This time you're just going to move x with the y, and you're going to multiply by everything by the number on the bottom, okay, by the denominator. Okay, make sure you multiply everything, okay, even after the equal sign. All right, so remember on number 7, we went over this in the warm-up. You must solve for y first. And remember, when you divide by a negative, changes the sign. It flips it. All right, I hope this helps. Bye, guys.